And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Tonight's weather showing this front shifting eastward here and pushing into northern Canada there, but trailing back through the interior here with some areas of light snow with it, all the way out to the northern Bering Sea, and then warm front extending down into the next system out here, bringing rain possibly as far east as Atka Island later tonight, but rest of the Bering Sea, light winds, dry conditions right across southern Alaska. Look for varying amounts of mid and high level clouds here across the southern areas there, and still windy and cold here over the southeast coast from with the windiest conditions from about Juneau northward through Lynn Canal. And for tomorrow, high pressure holding here over the Yukon, but less of a gradient now across the southeast coast. The winds should be a little lighter, still looking at gale force winds over the inside waters though. Lighter winds again for the southern Alaska with mostly clear skies, still some variable mid and high level clouds. This front stalled in the central interior, slowly weakening, but it'll continue some areas of light snow and flurries again from the southern Seward Peninsula, northern Norton Sound, eastward along the front there over toward the border. High pressure over the north slope, light winds, dry conditions, maybe some clearing. And again, the eastern Bering Sea here, large area looking pretty good with possible widespread clearing here of Bristol Bay, Alaska Peninsula up toward the Pribilof Islands. Area of rain edging eastward there to about Atka Island. And then for Friday, front right through here pushes a little more in the way of some wind and rain into Adak and Atka, but nothing too serious there. Again, the eastern part of the Bering Sea looking pretty good. With light winds, dry conditions here, mostly clear skies, Alaska Peninsula, Kodiak Island, southwest coast. Northward, the interior, just some leftover clouds, maybe a few flurries from that front that's dissolved now. And really off the picture there. Another high Arctic high here pushing into the northwest territories there. And that'll maintain the strong northeast winds, gale force winds over the central and northern southeast coast. So going to the coastal water forecast, again tomorrow, north winds 35 knots. Northern central areas, Lynn Canal, Glacier Bay, Stevens Passage with some higher gusts. North 25 for Clarence Strait. And we've got small craft advisories for the central and south coast of the Panhandle for northeast winds 25 to 30 knots with seas 9 to 11 feet. North coast, north to northeast at 10 to 20. And then for the day on Friday, a little bit of a pickup, but not too much here on the north coast. North to northeast winds 15 to 20 knots. Small craft advisories here for the remainder of the coastline. Northeast winds 25 knots. And gale warnings continue for Stevens Passage and Lynn Canal for north winds at 35 knots with higher gusts, while Clarence Strait will be more of a northwest direction and lower at about 20 knots. Prince William Sound, northwest winds 15 knots tomorrow. And the eastern North Gulf Coast here, north winds 25, gusts 40 knots, 15 knots for the central North Gulf Coast, west side northwest at 25. And the Barren Islands, Kamishak Bay, northwest winds 30 to 35 knots. And Cook Inlet, variable to north winds at 10 to 20 knots. And for the day on Friday, not much change here for Cook Inlet. Light and variable winds north of the Forelands, north at 20 south. And for Kamishak Bay and the Barren Islands, north winds at about 25 knots with 6 to 8 foot seas. North Gulf Coast, north winds 15 knots. East side, though, still looking at northeast winds at 30 knots. And Prince William Sound, north winds at 15 knots. Kodiak Island, northwest winds 15 to 25 knots tomorrow. And northeast at 15 to 20 for the Alaska Peninsula. Bristol Bay, north at 20. For Friday, Kodiak Island, north to northwesterlies, 20 to 25 knots. Variable winds, 10 to 15 knots for the Alaska Peninsula, and northeast about 20, with 4 foot seas for Bristol Bay. And for the eastern Aleutians, for tomorrow, east to southeast winds, 15 to 20 knots. Southeast winds, 25 knots from Kiska Island eastward to Atka. And for the far western Aleutians, east winds at 25. Excuse me. For the western Aleutians there, west of Kiska, west-southwest 30 knots for Friday, south winds 25 for Amchitka Island. And then for Adak and Atka, over toward Nikolsky, looking at southeast winds at 25 knots. On Alaska Island, lighter winds from the south and southeast at 15 to 20. And for the southwest coast tomorrow, kind of a split here. South of Nunivak Island, northeast at 15. Yukon Delta coast, pretty light, south at 10, southwest 15, St. Lawrence Island, Norton Sound, southeast winds at 20 for the Pribilof Islands, as well as St. Matthew Island. And then for the day on Friday, south 25 for St. Matthew Island with 9-foot seas, south 15 for the Pribilofs, east at 15 for the Kuskokwim Delta coast, and southeast winds 20 knots here for the Yukon Delta coast, St. Lawrence Island. Otherwise, Norton Sound winds will be east at 20 knots. And for the central and eastern Boulevard Sea coast tomorrow, brisk wind advisories. West winds 25 to 30 knots. Western Arctic coast, west at 15 knots. And for the Chukchi Sea, east to north winds at 10 to 15. And then for Friday, Chukchi Sea, east winds 15 to 20 knots. East 10 to 15 for the western Arctic coast. Much lighter winds now here along the central and eastern Boulevard Sea coast from the west or southwest at 10 to 15 knots.